everybody's welcome. So welcome, Sue, to you.
Well, thank you. It's a pleasure to be here with you.
Yeah, it's great. So you were an intuitive and had a sense of spirits, of what people would call otherworldly things from early on. Why don't you talk a little about that?
Well, I grew up in New Orleans. My mother is French Cajun, and she came from a long line of women with the sense, they called it, who would wake up in the night knowing that someone had died before the phone call came announcing it. And yet it wasn't something they were especially proud of. So I was given the message early on, you know, that's nice that you have dreams that come true, but you better be quiet about that or it can just get you in trouble. Nevertheless, as a kid, you know, I'd come to the breakfast table and explain a dream that I had had about a car accident, very detailed and specific, the color of the truck, the road we were on. And my family would sort of laugh, but you know, my father would ask me things like, you saw the color of the truck? And I'd say, oh yeah, it was green. And my dad would say, well, I thought we couldn't dream in color. And he really wanted to understand it all. And then the next day, we'd all forgotten about it. We'd be driving on that exact road, and a green truck, exactly like I had described, would be in front of us, and it would stop suddenly, and I'd be in the back seat screaming, stop, it's my dream, don't hit it. And so we would not crash into it, but we'd come up against it. And my family started to pay attention and go, all right, well, she's got some unusual things going on, but still it was the 50s. And so the message was, that stuff is interesting, but it can probably get you in trouble, so be quiet about it.
Were you of the religious background where that was almost the work of the devil?
Well, you know, the Catholics are a little bit more open about that because they do sort of embrace things more than the heaven and hell Christian, very strict Christian path. So they didn't tell me it was from the devil, but they certainly made it clear that it wasn't going to serve me in life to honor that gift. And my father was a wonderful, generous, warm man, but he was an engineer, a left-brain linear thinker. And he would take me to the library and say, you know, let's go look up some books on this stuff and see if we can learn about it. And I loved it that he did that. And we'd go and look through the library and try to find books on the supernatural. And back in the 50s, there was almost nothing, you know, but we would sit down and try to read about it. And he knew that I was sort of troubled by things that I would dream about, and I'd wake up in the night upset, and he would walk me around the house and calm me down. And for me, it was a journey of learning how to use this gift and be able to connect with the other realms and see things without being afraid of them. And that took me a long time. It took me many, many years.
Why don't you talk a little about that process, because there are probably a lot of kids who are...
In fact, I think everyone comes in intuitive. You know, we're all, as children, we're all very in touch with those other realms. And some of us are, like me, a little bit less able to shut it out than others. But the thing I help people with now is realizing that initial impression that you get of someone standing next to you, or of a voice giving you guidance, or of a dream that you have that seems very important, that's always right, and it's always helpful, and you don't get that information unless it's being given to you on purpose to help you and to help you help other people. And that was the piece that took me a long time to understand, that if I woke up in the night with a spirit standing next to the bed in complete full apparition, that he wasn't there to hurt me. He was there to give me some information that I could use actually to help other people with. And I've learned since that spirits were coming to me to give me a message to pass to someone who was grieving their death. And even though now, Alan, to be honest, I still wake up screaming, I quickly learn to calm myself down and listen and ask questions rather than be afraid, and then pass that knowledge on to my clients the next day. And I help a lot of grieving people because their loved ones show up the night before in my dreams and in my bedroom, and they pass on messages. And I've gotten more used to it, but it took me a long time. It took me a long time.
And these, do you see the actual apparitions of the relatives, or an angel? Or
I'll give you an example. it's just been consistently in my life since I was a child. I must have a sign on my head that says, I'm open for business if you're in the other realms and you have a message. About a year ago, I had a client, or a few years ago, I had a client the next morning from New Orleans who I'd never met. And when I work with clients, I take their name and their date of birth, and that's all I know. And then I meditate on that, and I work with their path from numerology and meditate on it and ask for guidance. And then I went to sleep that night, and in the middle of the night, I became aware that there was a man standing next to the bed, and I can still see him. He was so completely clear. He was wearing blue jeans and a plaid shirt, and had a big belly and a gray hair and a little beard, and he was very sweet. You could feel his energy, very sweet, and not trying to hurt me or scare me. But he was so vivid that, Alan, he was right next to the bed. And when that happens at 2 in the morning, you know, you're,
Right.
and I sat up and turned on the light. And as I turned on the light, he slowly, almost cell by cell, evaporated. And I had by that time woken up my husband, Gene, and the kids and the dog and the cat and everything. And they were all like, go back to sleep, it's just Mom, you know. And I was walking around the house checking closets because I couldn't believe that intense vision wasn't physical. You know, I thought,
Even after all
even
these,
after
all
all
these
that,
years.
that one was so real that I just thought there has to be a person in the house. That was so real. I can still see him. I could feel his presence. And so finally, I sat in meditation. I really connected with what that was about, and I realized, you know, it was a beautiful, loving spirit with a message for someone, but I don't know who. And the next morning, I picked up the phone to call my first client, and was working with her and talking to her, and she starts telling me her story, and all of a sudden, it all made complete sense. And he was her departed lover, and I described him to her. And she started crying because she had given up her faith in God, because she had made an agreement with her partner that if there was another realm, that when he departed, he would come back and communicate with her. And he was trying, but he couldn't get through to her. She wouldn't believe it. She wouldn't trust it. So he came through me the night before so that I could perfectly describe him. And it took a lot of energy for him to push that much into the physical world. And I could perfectly see him and then perfectly describe him to her. And she had a complete spiritual awakening and becoming at peace with the fact that death was not an ending, that it was just a continuation of our soul's journey. And the reason that was so important for her was her daughter had died when her daughter was 2 from leukemia. And it had really closed her heart and really caused her a lot of spiritual existential crisis. Why would a beautiful child suffer and die? And I know that pain, and I'm sure you know that pain that everyone goes through. And yet, to know that her partner was there on the other side telling her all is okay was her gift to understand that it was a continuation of spirit on the other side.
Wow. So, I mean, you do a lot of that kind of counseling and coaching in terms of information for people.
Right.
Is it always about loved ones passing, or is it about,
No.
you know, how to, you know,
Yeah,
be in life?
The funny thing is that the focus of my work is career, because in this planet at this time, we spend 85% of our waking hours at a job, and that's just the game that we're all playing right now at this stage of our consciousness evolution. And we have a lot of myths and kind of crazy thinking ideas about how we have to do that and how it doesn't have to be our true soul's purpose, and we just need to get the benefits and the paycheck. And you know, you and I both know that's not true, that the real game here is to wake up and realize that yes, every moment here has to be our true soul's purpose, and that we need to be making our living from doing our true soul's mission. And so that's the focus of my work. And yet, a person, in order to honor that and have the courage to manifest it, has to be spiritually awakened and enough to understand that the unseen world is more real than the seen world. And when we have death and loss and pain and all the things we experience on this dense realm, it can shut us down to our spiritual self. And so if the piece that's blocking us from opening up is grief, or pain from a departed loved one, that seems to be a particular gift that I have of bringing that knowledge in to help a person heal that, so that they can then focus on getting their work done and fulfilling their mission and not being stuck in their grief and their pain. And that also comes to me, Alan, because my husband died when I was 29, died from cancer, and then my best girlfriend died the next year, and my father, and I've been through many grief and loss experiences myself, and I got stuck in my grief and my pain for a long time and had that existential, what is the purpose if everyone is going to suffer and die?
And this was, you got stuck in this even though you'd been receiving all this information and all this channeling, in a sense, and connection with the other realms.
Yeah.
So it's amazing. I mean, so it really is a deep...
See, for me, I had a lot of spiritual ideas about how life worked. They were in my head.
Right.
And then when your soulmate partner dies in your arms, and even though I saw his spirit leave his body, which was the greatest gift of my life, I still didn't understand, well, why did he have to go through that? Why did he suffer that terrible physical disease for a year and a half? And then why did my girlfriend have to go through terrible suffering? And that was my question. What is the game here if we're going to suffer? What is the purpose of that? And people who go to war and different things like that, that's the question they come back with. Why are we creating this suffering and pain here? What is this about? And my response was the same as many grieving people, which is, I don't want to be here if that's what goes on here. If that's the best of what's happening, why am I here? I don't want to be here. And so my spiritual searching took me to study many different spiritual paths, Hinduism, Buddhism, everything. And I finally, after a long time, was able to figure out, it's a combination of free will and destiny when we're here. It's not either or. And that we do sign up to go through experiences. We choose them. And we choose them even if we're going through an illness. Our soul is saying, I think I want to burn up some of my negativity by experiencing some of that physical suffering. I don't need to do it that way, but if I do, I'm going to break some negative patterns I've been carrying with me for a long time. And so some souls will choose to go through that. And then they burn up all sorts of negative things they've carried, and by the time they cross over, they are completely love beings, completely cleansed of anything that's held them back. And the ones like me who are back remaining behind, we have our own lesson that we're learning in that, and we choose to go through their suffering with them to learn our own lessons. And once I was able to put all that together, it finally made sense, and I could help people then with those questions and those issues. Does that make sense?
Yeah, no, it's beautiful.